Welcome, wanderers of the shadowed vale, to another descent into the abyss of Throne of Nightmares. I am your host, the Whisperer in the Dark, guardian of tales too profane for the light of day. Tonight, we do not chase ghosts through empty halls or unravel the threads of forgotten murders. No, my dears, we delve deeper into the very marrow of blood itself. We trace the veins of a lineage poisoned at its source, a family whose name echoes like a curse upon the wind the thorns. Picture it now, if you dare. The year is 2025, but time bends in these stories, folding back upon itself like the petals of a night, blooming flower, revealing thorns that draw blood from the soul. It is a storm-lashed evening in the English countryside, where the moors stretch like the hide of some ancient, slumbering beast. Rain lashes the windows of Blackthorn Hall, that monolithic edifice of weathered stone and gargoyle sentinels, perched on the edge of the Yorkshire dales. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, the kind that clings to your skin long after you've fled its embrace. You stand at the threshold, or perhaps you are drawn there, inexorably, by a pull you cannot name. The iron gates creak open of their own accord, rusted hinges weeping tears of ferrous blood. Beyond, the gravel path winds through overgrown brambles, their thorns as sharp as accusations, snagging at your coat like desperate fingers. The hall looms, its turret stabbing at the bruised sky, windows like empty eye sockets staring out into the void. And in the heart of it all, a single light flickers in an upper chamber. A candle, a lantern, or the pale glow of something far more insidious, beckoning you closer. This is no mere haunted house, no spectral drama for the faint of heart. Blackthorn Hall is the cradle and crypt of the Thorne family, a bloodline steeped in shadows that predate the stones themselves. For over 3 centuries, the Thornes have walked these lands, their fortunes rising like smoke from a sacrificial pyre, only to choke them in its billowing descent. Whispers follow them like loyal hounds, tales of pacts forged in midnight groves, of heirs born under blood moons, their cries echoing with the wails of the damned. Children who vanish into the walls, fathers who claw at their own flesh in the dead of night, mothers who birth abominations that slither back into the womb. But why, you ask, should this ancient rot concern us now, in our age of electric lights and rational scorn? Because the curse does not slumber. It hungers, it evolves. Just last month. Yes. In the crisp bite of September 2025, a body was found on the moors, half buried in the hither, the flesh etched with thorns that grew from within. The coroner called it suicide, a tragic end to a reclusive scholar named Elias Thorne, the last of his line. But we know better, don't we? Those of us who listen to the throne's creak in the quiet hours. Elias did not end himself. He was harvested, reclaimed by the darkness his ancestors sowed. Oh, how it begins innocently enough, as all great horrors do. A whisper in the ear of a desperate man, a promise of power in exchange for, what? A soul? A firstborn? Or something subtler? More insidious, a thread woven into the very fabric of his descendants' fates. Tonight, we shall unspool that thread, follow it through the labyrinth of generations, where each twist reveals a new atrocity, each not a scream stifled by propriety. We will walk the halls of Blackthorn, taste the metallic tang of fear on our tongues, feel the chill draft of unseen eyes upon our necks. But beware, listener, these tales are not for the idle curious. They are contagions, words that burrow like thorns into the soft earth of your mind. Once heard, they take root, sprouting visions in your dreams, shadows that linger at the edge of your sight. The Thorne curse is not confined to their blood, it seeks new vessels, new families to ensnare. As we embark on this journey, ask yourself, what darkness stirs in your lineage? What secret bargain did your forebears strike when the candles burned low and the devils came calling? Let us begin at the root then. In the year 1692, amidst the smoke and suspicion of England's witch-hunting frenzy, yes, the very year Salem's gallows groaned under the weight of the innocent, a man named Josiah Thorne knelt in the fog, shrouded ruins of an ancient druid circle. He was no noble then, merely a human farmer with calloused hands and eyes hollowed by famine. His wife lay dying in childbed, his fields barren under a sky that wept without mercy. Desperation is the devil's finest ink, and Josiah dipped his quill deep. The circle was said to be older than Stonehenge, a ring of blackened menhirs etched with runes that twisted like serpents in the moonlight. Locals shunned it, calling it the Devil's Thicket, where the thorns grew tallest and the wind carried voices from the pit. But Josiah, driven by a grief sharper than any blade, traced those runes with trembling fingers. He poured out his plea, not for gold or glory, but for legacy, for a name that would endure, roots that would delve deep and bear fruit eternal. And it answered, not with thunder or flame, but with a rustle in the underbrush, a figure cloaked in bramble and shadow, eyes like polished obsidian. Blood for blood. It hissed, voice like leaves scraping bone. Your line shall thorn the earth, pricking kings and beggars alike. But every bloom comes with barbs, and the harvest—
Oh, the harvest is mine.
Josiah sealed it with a prick of his thumb, blood welling crimson against the stone. His wife lived. The fields burst forth in unnatural abundance. And Blackthorn Hall rose from the moors like a tumor, its foundations laid in that very circle. From that night the Thorns ascended, lands granted by a fearful king, marriages to merchant daughters swollen with dowries. Josiah's son, Ebenezer, became a magistrate, his judgments as swift and unyielding as thorns. Grandchildren scattered like seeds, their branches reaching into Parliament, into the East India Company, into the shadowed corners of empire. Wealth flowed like black sap, staining their hands indelibly. Yet the curse whispered its first warning in the cradle. Ebenezer's heir, little Silas, born on All Hallows' Eve, did not cry. Instead, from his tiny mouth came a rasp like wind through dry brambles. By his 3rd year, he spoke in tongues, words that withered flowers in the vase. Servants fled the nursery, claiming shadows coiled around the cradle like lovers. Silas lived to 20, wedding a pale beauty from Devon, but on their wedding night, she screamed of thorns piercing her from within. She birthed a stillborn son, its skin etched with faint, thorn-like scars. Silas hanged himself from the hall's grand chandelier, his body twisting in the dawn light like a new branch-seeking sun. And so it began, the generational darkness, a blight that flowered in prosperity's garden, turning every triumph to ash. The Thorns buried their secrets in the family crypt, walls lined with lead to muffle the echoes, but the thorns grew anyway, piercing the veil between worlds. As we press on, feel the weight of those stones upon your chest, the damp chill seeping into your bones. This is no fairy tale with princes to slay the beast. This is the Thorn legacy, a crown of thorns for every hair, a throne built on nightmares that never end. Stay with me, for the roots delve deeper still, and what they unearth may mirror the shadows in your own heart. Now, let us descend layer by layer into the labyrinth of the Thorn bloodline. Imagine yourself not as observer, but as witness, perhaps a long-lost cousin, summoned by a cryptic letter sealed with thorn-embossed wax, or a scholar lured by dusty tomes in the British Library's forbidden stacks. The air grows heavier as we cross the threshold of Blackthorn Hall, the great oak door, groaning like a dying breath. Dust motes dance in the slivers of moonlight, piercing the grimy panes, and the scent assaults you first, mildew and iron, with an undercurrent of something sweeter, like overripe berries bursting underfoot. We begin with Josiah, the architect of damnation. He was a man of broad shoulders and weathered skin, eyes the color of storm clouds, hair wild as the moors he tilled. Born in 1665, the year of the Great Plague shadow, Josiah knew hardship as kin. His father perished in the flames of the fire of London, rumors swirling that the blaze was no accident, but a pyre for debts unpaid to darker creditors. Josiah inherited naught but a plough and a grudge against the heavens. The famine of 1691 struck like a scythe. Crops failed, livestock bloated and burst in the fields, neighbors turned to banditry or the noose. Eliza, his wife, was a wisp of a woman with hair like spun moonlight and hands that once wove tapestries of hope. Pregnant with their first, she wasted away, her belly a cruel mockery. It was then, under a moon bloated as a corpse, that Josiah stumbled upon the thicket. The path to the circle was no path at all. a warren of brambles that tore at flesh like vengeful spirits. Thorns as long as daggers, barbed and black, snagged his breeches, drawing beads of blood that the earth drank greedily. He pushed on, whispering prayers that curdled on his lips, until the menhirs rose before him, 20 in number, forming a perfect ring scarred by time and malice. At their center, a flat altar stone, veined with quartz that gleamed like frozen lightning. He knelt, not in supplication, but in rage. God has forsaken us. He spat, pounding the stone until his knuckles split. If the Almighty turns away,
Then let the adversary hear.
his words hung in the air, and the wind answered. A gale that bent the brambles double, carrying scents of sulphur and wild honey. From the shadows between stones slithered the figure tall, cloaked in what seemed living vine, face obscured by a mask of woven thorns. Its voice was a chorus, male and female, young and ancient, scraping against the inside of Josiah's skull. What would you give for roots that never wither? For branches that pierce the sky and claim the sun? The figure extended a hand, gloved in bark that split to reveal fingers like gnarled roots. Josiah's mind reeled with visions, fields golden with wheat, Eliza laughing in a sunlit parlor, sun sturdy as oaks. All I have, he rasped. The figure laughed, a sound like branches cracking in frost. Your bloodline shall be my garden. It will thorn the world, drawing sustenance from triumph and tragedy alike. But remember, every rose has its price. The petals fall and the thorns remain. A thorn-tipped finger pricked his palm, and fire raced through his veins. He signed in blood, the runes glowing briefly before fading to scars. Dawn found him staggering home, pockets heavy with what? Seeds? No, knowledge. He scattered them in barren soil, and by week's end, the fields erupted. Eliza rallied, birthing Ebenezer under a sky clear as crystal. Blackthorn Hall was conceived that night, funded by a sudden inheritance from a distant uncle who, it turned out, had died interstate in a debtor's prison, throat slit by his own hand, they said, though the wound resembled a thorn's embrace. Ebenezer grew like thistle in cracked stone, tall, unyielding, with eyes that pierced secrets from men's souls. By 18, he was apprenticed to a magistrate in York, his mind a blade honed on Josiah's tales of the thicket, though the old man swore him to silence. The bargain is ours alone, Josiah warned, his own hands now gnarled, skin mapped with faint thorn patterns that itched under moonlight. Prosperity bloomed. Ebenezer wed Margaret Hale, daughter of a wool merchant whose fleets plied the North Sea. Her dowry bought the land surrounding the thicket, and Blackthorn rose 3 stories of grey stone, gargoyles leering from eaves. A grand hall with a fireplace vast enough to roast an ox. The cellars delved deep, echoing the circle's roots, lined with oak panels carved in subtle runes, but the shadows stirred early. Ebenezer's first son, Silas, arrived in 1717. The night a tempest raged. The midwife fled, babbling of a child born clutching a thorn in his fist, drawn from the ether. Silas was quiet, unnaturally so, his laughter a rasp that set dogs howling. As a boy, he wandered the thicket, returning with crowns of brambles that never wilted, pressing them into his mother's palm until she blanched at their chill. By manhood, Silas was a poet of sorts, verses dripping with melancholy. In my veins the briar winds, the coiling tight where no man finds. Bloom I must in crimson dew, dart for the harvest comes for you. He courted Lydia Blackwood, a vicar's daughter with skin like porcelain and eyes haunted by her own losses. Her siblings lost to the 1720 smallpox outbreak. Their wedding was a spectacle, the hall ablaze with candles, guests from London in silks and wigs. But as the vows were spoken, a gust extinguished every flame, leaving the chapel in twilight. Lydia later confessed to seeing thorns curling from the altar cloth, invisible to all but her. The wedding night sealed their fate. In the bridal chamber, tapestries of hunting scenes, Lydia awoke screaming. "They grow inside me," she gasped, clawing at her nightgown. Faint welts rose on her abdomen, thorn-shaped, weeping clear fluid that smelled of earth. Silas held her, his own skin prickling in sympathy, but dawn brought silence. She conceived, or so they thought. The birth was in 1722 under a blood moon that painted the moors scarlet. Labor lasted 3 days, the hall filled with the stench of sweat and something foller, rotting vegetation. When the child emerged, it was no babe but a horror, limbs twisted like roots, skin translucent, veined with black thorns that pulsed. It did not cry, it rustled. Lydia reached for it, and the thing latched, drawing not milk but blood. She withered before their eyes, her final words a whisper. "The harvest, it's yours." The creature was smothered, buried in unhallowed ground beyond the thicket. Silas descended into madness, his poems turning to ravings scrawled on walls in berry juice. The seed takes root in forbidden soil, to father to monster, blood for oil. He swung from the chandelier in the grand hall, body swaying like a pendulum, thorns, real or imagined, blooming from his noose. Ebenezer, grief-stricken, burned Silas's works, but echoes lingered. Josiah, ancient now at near 70, confessed on his deathbed. The figure returns in dreams, tending its garden. We are but weeds to it. He perished clutching a thorn from the thicket, driven into his heart. The line teetered, but Ebenezer's second son, Tobias, survived the pox that claimed his siblings. Born in 1725, Tobias was the model's heir, fair-haired, scholarly, wedding Eliza's niece for continuity. He expanded the estate, importing rare plants from the colonies, exotic vines that twisted unnaturally in the greenhouse. Whispers grew. Servants saw Tobias at midnight, pruning roses that blowed when cut, murmuring to shadows, yet prosperity veiled the rot. Tobias entered Parliament in 1750, championing enclosure acts that thorned the commons, displacing peasants like his own father once was. His home became a salon for luminaries, Boswell, Johnson, who marveled at the hall's curios, a library of occult tomes bound in calfskin, two supple portraits where eyes followed the viewer. But the curse coiled tighter. Tobias's daughter, Amelia, born 1752, was beauty incarnate, courted by lords. On her 16th birthday, during a masked ball, she vanished into the thicket. Searchers found her at dawn, clothed in brambles, babbling of a lover with thorn crown. She wed Lord Harrington, but their hairs were plagued. The firstborn died in cradle, body rigid, as if frozen in Thorne's grip. The second, a son named Reginald, grew with a limp, legs scarred from birth with embedded spines. Reginald Thorne, our bridge to deeper shadows, came of age in the revolutionary fervor of 1776. A colonel in the colonies, he returned with tales of rebellion, and a locket containing a dried thorn from a Mohawk medicine man who warned of blood debts across the sea. Reginald's marriage to Abigail Voss, a widow with witch trial ancestry, bore 3 children, but the hall's nights grew restless. Footsteps in empty corridors, cries from the nursery that resolved to rustling leaves. One storm-torn evening in 1789, as France's guillotines thirsted, Reginald descended to the cellars. There, amid wine racks and forgotten crates, he uncovered a hidden chamber, walls alive with glowing runes, floor scattered with desiccated thorns. In the center, a mirror, Josiah's altar stone, polished to reflect not faces but futures. Reginald gazed and saw his line, a tapestry of triumphs laced with thorns, bankruptcies, scandals, suicides, culminating in a figure cloaked in shadow, holding a bleeding heart. He smashed the mirror, shards embedding in his palms like stigmata. But the damage was done. Abigail, hearing the crash, rushed down, only to trip into the shards. Her fall birthed prematurely their youngest, a girl named Elowen, who entered the world with eyes open, staring at voids unseen. Thus ends our first descent, the roots taking hold, the thorns climb, but the brambles ensnare. Feel them now, listener, the faint prickle at your fingertips, the whisper in your ear. The darkness is generational, patient as the grave, and we have only begun to unearth its blooms. The thorns dig deeper now, listener, twisting through the flesh of time. We leave the 18th century's powdered wigs and revolutionary smoke, stepping into the industrial haze of the 19th, where steam engines belch like dragons, and the thorns, ever adaptive, sink their roots into coal and iron. Blackthorn Hall expands, wings added, a clock tower piercing the perpetual suit, its chimes tolling like funeral bells. The air within grows thicker, laced with the acrid tang of machinery and the ever-present rot from the thicket, now a mere copse encroaching on the lawns. Reginald's twilight years were a descent into paranoia. He boarded the hidden chamber, but the runes bled through the mortar, faint glows at witching hour. Abigail, scarred from her fall, became a recluse, stitching Thorne motifs into samplers that she burned at dawn, fearing they summoned the figure. Elowen, their fragile daughter, flowered into womanhood amid the hall's gloom, a waif with raven hair and skin pale as moonlight on snow. Suitors came, drawn by her dowry and the family's whispered mystique, but none endured her gaze.
She sees your thorns,
the servants murmured, for Elowen's eyes held mirrors reflecting not flattery but flaws, the barbs of ambition, jealousy, deceit. In 1812, as Napoleon's empire crumbled, Elowen wed Captain Percival Langford, a naval officer scarred by Trafalgar's cannons. Their union was passionless, a bargain sealed in the drawing room under crystal chandeliers that tinkled like mocking laughter. Percival sought stability amid post-war chaos. Elowen escaped from the hall's clutches. But the wedding feast turned fast. The cake, adorned with sugar thorns, collapsed into a writhing mass of black vines that crawled across the table, ensnaring silverware. Guests fled, chalking it to sabotage, but Elowen knew, the thicket's tendrils stretching beyond their bounds. Their first child, born in 1814, was Edmund, a sturdy boy with his father's jaw and his mother's sight. He thrived at first, romping the moors, collecting fossils from the cliffs where the sea gnawed like teeth. But at 7, during a family picnic, he pricked his finger on a seemingly innocuous rose in the garden. The wound festered overnight, black lines racing up his arm like roots seeking light. Fevers came, dreams of the figure tending him as a sapling, whispering, "Grow strong, my thorn, for the wind will test you." Edmund survived but changed, quieter, with a habit of scratching runes into tabletops, vanishing into the thicket for hours. Percival, pragmatic, sent him to Eton, hoping distance severed the ties. It did not. Letters arrived stained with berry ink. "Father, the shadows here wear boys' faces. They tell of Josiah's bargain. How the blood calls to blood." At 16, Edmund returned, a young man of sharp intellect and sharper tempers, enrolling in Cambridge to study natural philosophy. There he met Beatrice Crowe, a botanist's daughter with hands stained green from her father's greenhouses. Beatrice was fire to Elowen's ice, vibrant, questioning, her laughter chasing shadows. They wed in 1837, the year Victoria ascended, amid the hall's reluctant splendor. Blackthorne, now a Gothic behemoth with gaslights flickering in iron sconces, hosted a ball where guests danced to waltzes that soared into dirges. Beatrice, undaunted, planted a conservatory, exotic orchids from Ceylon, carnivorous pitchers that snapped at flies with thorned maws. Their children came swiftly, twins in 1839, Lionel and Lavinia. The birth was eerie. Elowen, attending as midwife in spirit, felt the air thicken, thorns rustling in the rafters. Lionel emerged first, robust, his cry a bellow. Lavinia followed silent, her tiny hand clutching a sliver of bramble from nowhere. As infants, they mirrored Lionel the sun, Lavinia the shade. He built forts from the hall's attics. She drew circles on the nursery floor, sprinkling salt to ward unseen visitors. Prosperity peaked under Edmund. He invested in railways, veins of iron threading the moors like the curse's own arteries. Thorne and Sons became synonymous with progress, locomotives bearing their crest, a stylized thorn entwined with laurels. London society courted them dinners at the Reform Club, where Edmund debated Darwin over port, dismissing evolution as merely thorns in God's garden. Beatrice, ever the scientist, collected specimens from the thicket, pressing leaves that retained their chill years later. But the hauntings escalated, no longer whispers but roars. In 1845, during the Irish Famine's distant echoes, the hall's clocks ran backward. Servants reported footsteps, cloven, they swore, in the corridors, trailing mud-scented of sulphur. Lavinia, at 6, awoke one night to find her bed draped in vines, coiling about her wrists like manacles. She screamed and Lionel rushed in, only to see the shadows coalesce into the figure, Thorne mask impassive. "Your sister blooms first," it intoned, before dissolving into mist. Lavinia changed thereafter. Once playful, she turned inward, sketching family trees where branches ended in skulls, Thorne's piercing eyes. At 12, she confided in Beatrice, the garden hunger's mother. It dreams of us as fertilizer. Beatrice, rational to a fault, burned the sketches, but fire held no power, the paper reformed in Lavinia's drawer by morn. Lionel, spared at first, channeled vigor into sport, fox hunts across the moors where hounds bayed at thorns that bled when torn. But in 1851, the great exhibition's shadow fell. Edmund took the family to the Crystal Palace, marveling at steam and steel. Lavinia, entranced by a fern exhibit, pricked her palm on an imported spine. That night, in their London hotel, she thrashed in sleep, murmuring Mohawk incantations, echoes of Reginald's locket, long lost but not forgotten. Back at Blackthorn, the curse flowered in earnest. Edmund's ledger's unbalanced fortunes vanished into thicket investments, phantom companies siphoning wealth. Workers on the rail lines reported sabotage, ties uprooted by invisible hands, tracks twisted like briars. One foreman investigating a derailment vanished, his body surfaced weeks later, mummified in the thicket, thorns woven through his ribs like a cage. Beatrice sought answers in the conservatory, crossbreeding thicket brambles with English roses. Her hybrids were monstrous, blooms that unfurled at midnight, petals veined black, releasing spores that induced visions. Guests at garden parties collapsing, raving of blood harvests. One victim, a duke's son, clawed his eyes, screaming, "The roots see through me." Lavinia, now 16, eloped with a radical poet, Elias Hawthorne, fleeing to the continent. Their letters spoke of liberation, but ended abruptly in 1857 from Venice. The canals run red with thorns. It follows. They were never found, though fishermen dredged a gondola entwined in brambles, bearing Lavinia's locket. Inside a dried finger, Thorne pierced. Lionel, heir apparent, hardened. He married Clara Voss, Abigail's kin. Closing the circle in 1860, their wedding was somber, the hall draped in black crepe after a cholera outbreak claimed Beatrice. Edmund, broken, retired to the clock tower where gears ground like teeth. Clara bore a son, Mortimer, in 1862, under a comet's tail that streaked the sky like a bleeding wound. Mortimer was the curse's masterpiece, born with a call etched in runes, his first word not mama, but harvest. As a toddler, he dismantled toys, reassembling them into thorn mazes. Lionel, obsessed with legacy, groomed him for the boardrooms, but nights brought terrors. The nursery walls wept sap, figures pressing against the plaster. Josiah, Silas, Lavinia, mouths open in silent pleas. In 1870, as the Franco-Prussian War raged, Lionel ventured to the thicket. Armed with Beatrice's shears, blades quenched in holy water, he hacked at the brambles, seeking the circle's heart. But the thorns fought back, lashing like whips, drawing blood that the earth absorbed with slurps. Deeper in, he found the altar, now overgrown, a sapling rooted in its cracks. The figure awaited, larger, vines pulsing. "Prune as you will, my thorn. The garden grows eternal." Lionel fled, shears lost, wounds festering into thorn scars. Madness took him slowly. He boarded rooms, bricked the thicket's edge, but roots burst through floors, coiling stairs. Clara, desperate, consulted mediums, seances in the drawing room where ectoplasm formed briars, spelling or ape. Mortimer, at 10, watched it all with equanimity. He confided in no one, but journals later revealed dreams the figure as gardener, pruning weaker branches. Lavinia, sealers for stronger. In 1888, Jack the Ripper's fogs blanketing London, Lionel succumbed. Found in the clock tower, throat encircled by clock hands twisted into thorns, eyes staring at a note. The time comes round. Edmund outlived him, perishing in 1892, Salem's tricentennial, a mocking symmetry. His final act burning the family Bible, pages curling like petals, revealing hidden runes beneath. Mortimer inherited a crumbling empire. The railways rusted, investments soared in economic thorns. He wed Isolde Fairchild, an Iris with occult leanings, in 1895. Their union birthed twins again, Victor and Victoria, 1897, mirroring the cycle. Blackthorn, now electrified, hummed with current, but shadows defied the glare. Victor was bold, Victoria veiled. As Edwardian splendor waned into Great War's maw, the hall echoed with absences, servants conscripted, Mortimer funding munitions that thorned battlefields. In 1914, Victor enlisted, returning shell-shocked in 1918. babbling of trenches where thorns grew from mud, snaring the fallen. Victoria spared the front, delved the library, uncovering Josiah's original pact, scratched on vellum, blood faded. She attempted ritual circles of salt in the cellar, incantations from forbidden grimoires. But the figure came not in wrath but invitation. "You're in the garden," it cooed, and Victoria vanished into the mirror, shards her reflection blooming eternal. The war's end brought influenza, claiming Isolde in 1919. Mortimer, alone with Victor, fortified the whole. Trenches around the thicket, flamethrowers at the ready. But fire only fed the roots, blazes died to embers, smoke forming faces. Victor married in 1925 to a flapper named Daphne. All jazz and gin. Their daughter Eleanor, born 1927, arrived amid the hall's first true silence. Clocks stopped, wind stilled. Eleanor grew with the centuries, Roar radios crackling ghost stories, automobiles churning gravel. But at 5, she found the locket. Reginald's resurfaced in the cellars and pricked her lip. Blood called blood. Visions flooded the figure's mask, cracking to reveal her own face. By 1939, as bombs fell on London, the Thornes retreated inward. Victor, in munitions again, profited from destruction. Daphne bored, took lovers, one found hanged in the thicket, thorns in his eyes. Eleanor, 16, studied psychology at Oxford, seeking rational thorns for the family's madness. World War II's blackout cloaked Black Thorne in velvet dark. Air raid sirens wailed like banshees, but the true horror brewed below. In 1943, Eleanor unearthed the chamber anew, mirror restored by unseen hands. Gazing, she saw future's atomic blooms, cold wars, a lineage ending in her womb. Empty, Thorne barren. She smashed it again, shards embedding in Victor's flesh when he intervened. Gangrene set in, black lines like roots. He died raving in 1945. Hiroshima's shadow long, blaming the figure for global thorns. Mortimer endured to 1950, perishing in a conservatory blaze. Spontaneous, they said, but thorns charred the walls. Eleanor inherited, wedding a Professor Harold Black in 1952. Their son Theodore, born 1954, was the post-war hope. Television in the parlor, rock and roll shaking dust. But the curse adapted. Theodore's toys animated at night, dolls with thorn limbs chasing him through halls. Eleanor, haunted by visions, underwent electroshock in the 60s, wires like brambles in her skull. Harold left, whispering of madness contagious. The 70s brought oil crises, Thorne investments in North Sea rigs, drills piercing earth like thorns. Theodore radicalized, protested, chaining to trees in the thicket. One night, 1979, he vanished during a solstice rite. Found days later, catatonic, thorns woven into his hair, murmuring, "The garden expands." Eleanor institutionalized herself in 1985, walls white but shadows gray. She died 1992, scribbling, "Break the circle or become it." Theodore recovered sporadically, fathering Elias in 1988 with a fleeting lover. Elias grew in the hall's decay, peeling wallpaper, leaking roofs, raised by ghosts and governesses who fled mid-month. A prodigy in history, he pored over archives, piecing the pact. In 2010, Elias attempted the ultimate severance, excavating the thicket, dynamite from wartime stocks. The blast unearthed bones,
Josiah's servants,
intertwined with roots pulsing like hearts. The figure manifested fully, vines ensnaring the crew, bodies blooming with flowers that wilted to dust. Elias fled abroad, teaching in America, but returned 2020, pandemic isolation amplifying echoes. In September 2025, he walked the moors, thorn crown in hand, and lay down. The coroner found no note, but his skin bore the final harvest. Thorns erupted from pores, a map of the bloodline's fall. And so the darkness crests, listener. The Thorne's generational night yields no dawn, only deeper gloam where roots entwine our own. Feel the prickle. That's the hook, drawing you in. Now, pause with me, seekers of the veiled truth, as we step from the fevered dream of narrative into the chill archives of history. Here, in the musty vaults of fact and folklore, the Thorne tale finds its soil, not mere invention, but a thorn bush rooted in the very earth of England's shadowed past. We do not abandon the eerie, nay, we enrich it, blending the ledger's dry ink with the bard's whispering verse, until authenticity itself becomes a spectre, unsettling in its proximity to our world. Consider first the cradle of curses, 17th century England, a cauldron of superstition and strife. The year 1692, when Josiah knelt in the thicket, was no arbitrary dusk. It marked the zenith of the witch hunts that scarred Europe, spilling from the continent's pyres to England's gibbets. In Essex alone, over 500 souls faced trial between 1560 and 1680, accused of pacts with the devil. Contracts sealed in blood, often at ancient sites like stone circles. The thicket, our fictional ring, mirrors real locales, the Rollright stones in Oxfordshire, shunned as king's men, cursed by druid shades, or the devil's arrows in Yorkshire, monoliths said to summon tempests and thorns from hellish depths. Folklore abounds with such bargains. The devil's contract motif, catalogued in folklorist Catherine Briggs' Dictionary of British Folk Tales 1972, recurs: a desperate soul trades lineage for fortune, only for the devil to claim heirs in grotesque tableaux. Think of the Somerset farmer who, in 1640s legend, sowed dragon's teeth for bountiful harvest, reaping instead children with serpentine limbs, echoing Josiah's monstrous progeny. Or the wild hunt tales, where spectral hounds chase the damned across moors, their baying the wind through thorns, a motif drawn from Germanic wild jagd imported via Norman conquest. The English Civil War, 1642-1651, forms another stratum, its religious fervor fertilizing curse law. Josiah's era postdates the war, but its wounds festered. Parliamentarian witch-finders like Matthew Hopkins roamed East Anglia, executing Covenanters, whose marks resembled thorn pricks, devil's teats, they called them. The Thorne ascent via magistrate Ebenezer evokes real families like the Birds of Virginia, transplanted English gentry who profited from colonial enclosures, their own scandals veiled in propriety. Blackthorn Hall itself archetypes the Gothic manor inspired by Strawberry Hill's 1749, Horace Walpole's Folly, but rooted in medieval keeps like Bolton Castle in Wensleydale, where Mary, Queen of Scots, was imprisoned, legends claiming her blood summoned phantom thorns in the tapestries. As we trace to the 18th century, the Enlightenment's rational thorns pierce the veil. Silas's poetic madness mirrors the graveyard school poets, Gray's Elegy, 1751, Blair's Grave, 1743, who romanticized death amid rising graveyards from plague and war. Yet beneath lay terror. The 1720 South Sea bubble burst fortunes, much as Thorne investments soared, reflecting real collapses like the Air Bank failure, 1772, where rooted debts ensnared aristocrats. The thicket's druidic ties draw from genuine revivalism. William Stukeley's Stonehenge, 1740, romanticized circles as Celtic altars, inspiring occultists like the Hellfire Club, whose rituals in West Wycombe caves as 1750s involve blood oaths and masked figures, precursors to our figure. Colonial echoes amplify the curse's reach. Reginald's Mohawk locket nods to real 18th century exchanges, British officers adopting native talismans during the French and Indian War 1754-1763, like the Thorne amulets of Iroquois shamans, believed to ward or render spiritual force, but twisting to curse interlopers. The American Revolution 1776 saw loyalist families like the Thornes dispossessed, their thorned legacies in land grants revoked, mirroring Burke's Reflections, 1790, on inherited rights corrupted. The 19th century's industrial bloom yields thorned fruit. Edmonds Railways evoke George Stephenson's Stockton-Darlington lines, 1825, but with sabotage tales from Luddite uprisings, 1811, 1860, where croppers through thorns into looms, folk term for spikes. The Great Exhibitions, 1851, showcased progress, yet hid horrors. Cholera epidemics from Thames pollution bodies rooted in mass graves. Beatrice's carnivorous plants reference Charles Darwin's insectivorous plants, 1875, but folklore twists them. Victorian fairy thorn legends, where hawthorns housed sighed, pricking the unwary to fairy realms, as in W.B. Yeats's Celtic Twilights, 1893. Lavinia's Venice disappearance channels the city's own curses, the Bridge of Sighs lore, where prisoners glimpsed liberty's last light, or Casanova's escapes laced with alchemical pacts. The Ripper's 1888 fogs parallel Thorne hauntings with Leather Apron, myths of a thorn-wielding surgeon drawn from real penny dreadfuls sensationalizing gore. The 20th century's wars globalize the generational blight. The Great War's trenches, as Victor knew, birthed no man's land Thorne's barbed wire entanglements that snared 10 million per Wilfred Owen's dulcet decorum est, 1977, Shell shock now PTSD afflicted 80,000 British soldiers there Thorned, minds echoing in Wolfe's Mrs. Dalloway, 1925. World War II's Blitz 1940-1940 when blanketed Yorkshire in fear air raid shelters like Blackthorn cellars, where folklore revived, witch bottles, buried to trap spirits filled with thorns and urine. Post-war, the curse adapts to modernity. The 1970s oil shocks 1973 mirrored Thorne rigs with North Sea platforms haunted by Kelpie thorns, Scottish Sea lore of drowning vines. Elias's 2020 pandemic isolation evokes COVID's collective madness with conspiracy spikes in occult revivals per the paranormal pandemic studies of 2021. Yet folklore binds it all the family curse archetype, from the House of Atreus in Aeschylus to the Kennedy hex whispers. In British annals, the Curse of the Hope Diamond, 17th century theft parallels Thorne jewels, stolen perhaps from the figure, cursing wearers with madness, or the Busby Stoop Chair 1702, where sitters met the noose much like Silas's chandelier. Educational yet eerie, this context unveils unsettling truths. Curses are cultural scars etched by plague, war, empire. The Thornes are every family, yours, mine, haunted by history's barbs. As we sift these layers, feel the archive's chill facts as thorns, pricking the illusion of progress. The darkness is not invented, it is inherited, waiting in the soil of our shared past. Having traversed the narrative's briar, maze and history's shadowed stacks, we now turn inward, listener, to the psyche's fertile gloom where symbols fester and themes bloom like nightshade. Here, the Thorne saga transcends mere chronicle. It becomes a mirror, thorn-framed, reflecting universal dreads, the sins of the father, coiled in the son's marrow, the hubris of legacy, barbing the future, the human thirst for eternity, slaked in infernal draughts. Our tone remains ominous, intellectual, a scalpel dissecting the soul's underbelly, revealing not answers, but echoes that resonate in your chest. At its core, the Thorne curse symbolizes inherited guilt, a psychological thorn bid drawn from Freud's totem and taboo 19 verse 3, where ancestral crimes haunt descendants as superego specters. Josiah's pact is the primal sin, Oedipal bargain with the father devil, replayed in each hair's flesh. Silas's suicide, Lavinia's vanishing. Not random, but reenactments, the bloodline's daemon demanding expiation. Jung would call it the shadow archetype incarnate, the repressed darkness of empire, colonialism, progress. Manifesting as thorns, those primal barbs of nature's defense, now weaponized against the self, the figure. No external fiend, but the animus twisted, the family's collective unconscious, gardening its neuroses into horrors. Psychologically, the generational transmission evokes epigenetics of trauma, modern science lending eerie credence. Studies like Rachel Yehuda's on Holocaust survivors 2016 show PTSD markers passed via DNA methylation, silent thorns in the genome, altering stress responses across lineages. The thorns embody this: Josiah's famine, fear epigenetically, Thorne's Ebenezer's judgments, Reginald's colonial scars prickle Mortimer's wars. Each hallucination, vines in veins, shadows coiling, is somatic, the body screaming what the mind suppresses. As Bessel van der Kolk details in The Body Keeps the Score, 2014, trauma lodges in flesh, not cortex. The thorns itches, welts, rustles are corporeal memories, the curse as chronic pain syndrome writ mythic. Thematically, it probes hubris and the Faustian Thorne, humanity's pact with progress, ever barbing back. Josiah's bargain mirrors Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, 1592, but generational, not one soul sold, but a dynasty. The Thornes ascents railways, munitions, parallel industrialism's cost. Enclosures displacing folk, thorns in the comments, wars harvesting youth, trenches as thickets. Its Promethean fire stolen for warmth, yielding burns that scar hairs. In cultural trauma, this connects to collective guilt, Germany's Vergangenheitsblut Lottegang post-Holocaust, or America's slavery echoes, where bloodlines bear invisible thorns, pricking society in riots, reckonings. Universal fears crystallize, entrapment in lineage, the dread of predestination. We inherit not gold, but ghosts, debts, secrets, madness, as in Morrison's beloved 1987. Where slavery's thorns choke the living, the thorns question free will. Is Elias's end fate or choice? The figure's garden suggests determinism, a panopticon of blood, evoking Foucault's Discipline and Punish 1975. Surveillance as thorns, watching from within. Yet glimmers of agency. Beatrice's hybrids, Eleanor's rituals, futile rebellions underscoring existential thorn we prune, but roots regrow. Human nature's darkness blooms here too, the banality of evil. Arendt's phrase, 1963, Thorne domestic. The thorns are no villains, but everymen, farmers, scholars, whose small packs snowball into atrocity. Prosperity's illusion veils rot, as in Austen's Pride and Prejudice, A18 Funtry there is undercurrents, but Gothic wealth from blood, Josiah's fields. Reginald's colony is mirrors capitalism's thorns, Marx's alienation where labor as hearse feeds the machine figured. Symbolically, thorns are multifaceted Christ's crown, martyrdom's barb, fairy law's portal, pricking to other worlds, evolutionary defense, nature's indifference. In the thorn mythos they hybridize, pain as beauty, growth as decay, echoing Gothic sublime. Burke's Terror 1757 in vastness, here intimate, familial. The thicket, Wamantum, Jungian Thunic realm, birthing monsters like the Minotaur's labyrinth. Connecting to cultural trauma, the saga Indix Empire's legacy, British thorns in India's Amritsar 19 Landine, Ireland, famine 1845, thorn investments complicit their hauntings karmic recoil. Globally, it resonates with ancestral curses in African diaspora lore, zombie thorns of voodoo or indigenous stolen lands, Mohawk amulets as resistance. Universal, the fear of sterility, lines end in barren wombs, Lydia's stillborn, Eleanor's empty, eco-anxiety thorn. As climate change harvests futures, intellectually ominous, this analysis unveils no exorcism, only proliferation. The thorn darkness is ours, psychological barbs of anxiety, cultural welts of inequality, human thorns of ambition. As we probe, feel the scalpel's edge, your own shadow stirring, roots delving into forgotten graves. What pact did your blood strike? The garden awaits, eternal, thorny, and achingly authentic. And so we emerge from the thorn thicket, listener, breath ragged, skin prickled, the taste of earth and iron lingering on the tongue. Blackthorn Hall recedes into the fog, its turrets mere silhouettes against a sky that promises no dawn, only perpetual gloaming. We have walked the bloodline's length, from Josiah's desperate prick in the Druid stone through centuries of blooming and withering. Ebenezer's iron judgments, Silas's chandelier dance, Lavinia's Venetian shroud, Victor's trench-born visions, down to Elias's moorland harvest, body a final, thorn-riddled offering. We have sifted history's soil, unearthing witch, hunt gibbets and industrial barbs, folklore's Faustian whispers and epigenetic scars. We have delved the psyche's briar, heart, confronting inherited guilt, hubristic pacts, the banal thorns of human striving. Yet what lingers is not resolution, but resonance. A chill draft at the nape, the faint rustle of brambles in the quiet of your room. The thorn curse endures not as relic, but contagion, a reminder that darkness is not slain, but pruned only to regrow fiercer. Their story haunts because it mirrors ours, every family a potential thicket, every ambition a seed sown in shadowed soil. We chase legacy, but what harvests us? The figure waits, patient as roots in winter frost, its thorn mask cracking to reveal your face. Mine. The pact was never Josiah's alone. It echoes in boardrooms where fortunes are bartered, in nurseries where cries rasp like wind through dry vines, in our own midnight doubts, when the mirror reflects not flesh, but futures pierced and bleeding. As the candles gutter low, consider Elias's final gaze upon the moors, stars above like distant thorns, earth below hungry for reclamation. Did he go willingly? A branch seeking the pruner's blade? Or did the blood call inexorably, generational night folding him into its eternal garden? The coroner's report speaks of suicide, but we, initiates of the throne, know better it was culmination, the curse's crimson bloom. And now, as you rise from this telling, feel the subtle shift, the itch beneath your skin, the whisper in the walls. Have we unearthed forbidden knowledge, or merely awakened what slumbers in your veins? Carry this tale into the lightless hours, wanderer. Let it thorn your dreams, a crown both beautiful and barbed. For in the throne of nightmares, every ending is but a root delving deeper, every question a hook drawing you back. Until next we descend, sleep shallow if at all. The harvest comes for us all.